Greetings, welcome back to IBI, India Business Insights. In our first video of this series, we looked into the early history of telecommunication, particularly in India. And in this video, we'll be looking at the Indian telecom industry after the 1991 economic reforms. Before we move forward, don't forget to subscribe to India Business Insights to stay tuned to many more insightful videos. The demand for telephones was booming then, and in the 1990s, the Indian government was under increasing pressure to overcome the state's severe fiscal crisis and resultant balance of payments. And in the 1991, as a part of the LPG policy accepted by the government, the Indian telecom sector was opened up for private investments. Television broadcasting began in India in 1959 and was operated by Doordarshan. The government put a network of transmitters all over the country and slowly expanded the transmission network. The policy reforms of the government in the 1990s attracted private initiatives in this sector, and since then, satellite television has increasingly shaped Indian society. Following the economic reforms in the 1990s, satellite television channels from around the world, such as BBC, CNN, CNBC, and other private television channels, gained a foothold in the country. The growth in the number of satellite channels was triggered by the entry of international players and corporate business houses such as Star TV Group and ZTV. Initially restricted to music and entertainment channels, the viewership grew, giving rise to several channels in regional languages, especially in Hindi. The main news channels available were CNN and BBC World. In the late 1990s, many current affairs and news channels sprouted, becoming immensely popular because of the alternative viewpoint compared to Doordarshan and significantly better production values. Some of the notable ones are Aaj Tak, Star News, CNN, and Times Now. Today, television is the most penetrative media in India, with industry estimates indicating that there are over 554 million TV consumers and 462 million with satellite connections, compared to other forms of mass media such as radio or the internet. It was during this period that the P.V. Narasimha Rao-led government introduced the National Telecommunications Policy in 1994, allowing foreign companies to own up to 49% in joint ventures with the Indian telecom companies. During this period, the World Bank and the International Telecommunication Union advised the Indian government to liberalize long-distance telecom services in order to end the monopoly of state-owned DOT and BSNL and to allow competition in the long-distance carrier business, which would help lower tariffs and improve nation's economy. But instead, the Rao-led government liberalized the local services, taking the rival political parties into confidence and securing foreign participation in the long-distance business. For basic telephony, the nation was split into 20 telecom circles and 18 telecom circles were designated for mobile services. Depending on the amount of revenue in each circle, these circles were categorized as A, B, and C. The government threw open the bids to one private company per circle along with the government-owned DOT per circle. For cellular service, 2 service providers were permitted per circle, and each was given a 15 years license. The government encountered opposition during all of these initiatives from the ITI, DOT, MTNL, VSNL, and other labor unions. However, the government persisted with these changes. In 1995, HFCL, an Indian telecom company, made outrageous bids of Rs 85,925 crores as license fees to DOT to snare 13 telecom circles. The market cap of each of the 3 largest companies in India at that time, Reliance, Unilever, and Tata Motors, were under USD 1.5 billion. The total bid was 17% of the total market capitalization of all the companies listed on the stock exchange. Hence, the auctions were aborted and the then telecom minister Pandit Sukhram was arrested. He had to face corruption charges and was forced to resign due to irregularities in the auction process and tweaking the auction rules after the bidding favor to the HFCL consortium. Some major telecom operators that dominate the telephony segment in India include privately owned companies like VI, Airtel, and Reliance Jio, and the state-owned companies such as BSNL and MTNL. When the new telecom policy was announced in 1999, only the government-owned BSNL and MTNL were allowed to provide landline phone services in India, with MTNL operating in Delhi and Mumbai and BSNL servicing all other areas of the country. Due to the rapid growth of the cellular phone industry in India, landlines were and are facing stiff competition from cellular operators, with the number of wireline subscribers falling from about 37 million in December 2008 to 20 million in October 2020. The market share of fixed-line telecom operators in India as of 31st August 2021, according to Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, can be understood through this pie chart. The then Union Telecom Minister Pandit Sukhram and erstwhile Chief Minister of West Bengal Jyoti Basu spoke to each other using handheld mobile phones on July 31, 1995. It was a first for India, where two of Nokia's earliest mobile phones were used, and the network itself was a joint venture between India's BK Modi Group and Australia's Telstra, known as the Modi Telstra's mobile net service. This cellular call inaugurated mobile net services in Calcutta. The company was one of the 8 companies licensed to provide cellular services in India. 2 licensees were awarded each for the 4 metropolitan cities. Back then, the initial phone call rates ranged from Rs 8.4 per minute for both outgoing and incoming calls, and in peak mobile traffic hours, the cost also went up to Rs 16.8 per minute. The phones themselves weren't affordable either. Telephony costs in today's time are next to a fraction of what it was back then. Calling comes for free, while data costs less than Rs 4 per gigabyte. The telecommunications system in India is the second largest in the world by the number of telephone users, including both fixed and mobile phones, with about 1,179 million subscribers as of 31st January 2021. The government and several private players run local and long-distance telephone services. Competition, especially after the entry of Reliance Jio, has caused prices to drop across India, which is already one of the cheapest in the world. The world-dominant players are VI, Airtel, Jio and BSNL MTNL. The market share of mobile telecom operators in India as of 31st August 2021, according to Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, can be understood through this pie chart. The Indian telecom market is mainly divided into 2 major segments, namely the fixed service providers (FSPs) and the cellular service providers. The fixed service provider network comprises landlines, basic services, and domestic and long-distance call services. The 2 major basic operators, BSNL and MTNL, comprise almost 90% of the FSPs in the country. Around 5% are operated by private firms and are mostly scattered in urban areas. In most of the cases, the private basic service telephone operators cater to offices, business firms, schools, and the corporate sector. The initial services in mobile telephony were based on both CDMA and GSM technologies. Today, particularly after the growth of mobile internet, CDMA technology has virtually disappeared and GSM is the dominant technology. Value-added service is a non-core telecommunications service for which suppliers add value to the customer's information by enhancing its form or content, by providing for its storage and retrieval. Over the years, value-added services has evolved a long way. The first cellular phone services was opened up to the private sector in 1994 and the National Telecom Policy was passed in 1994. After the gradual development of the field of telecommunications, the first broadband policy was passed in the middle of 2004. The telecom sector can be divided into 3 main areas: telephony, both wired and wireless, internet services, and value-added services. When mobile phones were introduced in the year 2000, there was only one service, voice calls, provided to the customer, and a cellular phone were offered with no other features. But today, handset manufacturers have flooded the market with new handsets offering advanced functions and features in order to attract more customers. These handsets enable new value-added services. With the growing number of mobile subscribers, any successful new additional service can generate at least a small amount of additional revenue. In such a scenario, mobile value-added services are a big boon to the field of telecom. It is one of the main areas driving additional growth in the market and is the major source of revenue for mobile network operators in India, particularly since the ARPUs in India is still among the lowest. For instance, caller ringback tone as a value-added service continues to dominate in revenue over all other services. It remains one of the best sources of income for mobile network operators. Under the Prasar Bharati Act, an independent organization under the name of Prasar Bharati was created in 1997 to handle public service broadcasting. The organization now includes All India Radio and Doordarshan, which earlier worked as media units under the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. As of June 2019, there are 381 private FM radio stations in India. Apart from private FM radio stations, All India Radio, the national public radio broadcaster of India, runs multiple radio channels. All India Radio service comprises 420 stations located across the country, and it originates programming in 23 languages and 179 dialects. With the entry of the private sector into the provision of telecom services, a need was felt to have an independent regulatory body. Hence, the government established Telecom Regulatory Authority of India in the year 1997. It reduced government interference in deciding tariffs and policy making. In the year 1999, new political forces came into play and Atal Bihari Vajpayee's new administration promoted reforms and further liberalization. In the year 2000, the Vajpayee government constituted the Telecom Dispute Settlement and Appellate Tribunal through an amendment of the TRI Act 1997. The primary objective of its establishment was to release TRI from adjudicatory and dispute settlement functions in order to strengthen the regulatory framework. Any dispute involving parties like the licensor, licensee, service provider and consumers is resolved by TDSAT. Moreover, any direction, order or decision of TRAI can be challenged by appealing in TDSAT. The telecom sector was liberalized under the National Telecom Policy, after which licenses were issued to companies in return for a fixed license fee. To provide relief from the steep fixed license fee, the government in 1999 gave an option to the licensees to migrate to the revenue sharing fee model. Under this, mobile telephone operators were required to share a percentage of their adjusted gross revenue with the government as annual license fee and spectrum usage charges. License agreements between the Department of Telecommunications and the telecom companies define the gross revenues of the latter. Adjusted gross revenue is then computed after allowing for certain reductions spelled out in these license agreements. The license fee and spectrum usage charges were set at 8% and between 3 to 5% of AGR respectively, based on the agreement. The dispute between Department of Telecommunications and the mobile operators was mainly on the definition of AGR. In 2005, the Cellular Operators Association of India challenged the government's definition of AGR calculation. In 2005, Telecom Dispute Settlement and Appellate Tribunal stayed the case in favor of telecom companies and held that AGR includes all receipts except capital receipts and revenue from non-core sources such as rent, profit on the sale of fixed assets, dividend, interest and miscellaneous income. However, setting aside TDSAT's order, the Supreme Court on October 24, 2019 upheld the definition of AGR as stipulated by the Department of Telecommunications. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with another video in this series very soon. Till then, stay tuned, and if you like this video, let us know in the comment section below.